Welcome back to another episode of Career Corner with my main man. I call him Ayo Mayo. We are orange boys, as you can see. My main man, please introduce yourself to the camera and tell the people who are watching what is it that you do for a living.
My name is Ayo Kolawole. I'm an independent. I'm a consultant like yourself.
Yes.
I'm a business consultant, and that's what I do.
Business consultant. What does that entail?
I've worked for different companies, playing different roles, and but ultimately, you get a task and you are helping companies solve their problems.
Okay, before we get to what you do, do you have any qualification that you have, maybe that may have assisted you getting to helping on work or in terms of work, or it's just like a skill that you pick up on the way?
Yes. I mean, I do have a qualification. So I think after matric, maybe I should just tell the story.
Okay, tell the story.
Yeah. So I remember I was in matric, and my dad asked me, so son, what do you want to study? And I think grade 11 actually, not matric, because then you have an idea because you're applying. So what do you want to study? And I said music. I grew up in a town where we were all aspiring rappers,
Yeah, just like everyone. Some of us are still rappers. Pop your collar.
And I used to, write music, produce that kind of stuff. But my dad said no. He's not going to pay for a music degree. He's not opposed to my music, but he doesn't think I need a degree to make music. So next thing, that school holidays, it took me to a psychologist, and I went through a whole lot of tests, and it came out that I was going to be good in something accounting related, or IT.
Okay.
So at the time, I had accounting on standard grade, so accounting was obviously off the table. And I mean, so I opted for IT. I mean, obviously, I have a PlayStation, so I figured I knew what IT was about. Yeah. So that fast forwarded to matric. When I finished matric, I applied and I went to the University of Zululand, also known as Ongoye.
Unizul.
So I studied at the Department of Computer Science. There was a degree at the time, it was brand new. It was called BSc in Data Communications and Technology, and that's what I registered for. And the reason for that was, back then things like telecoms was new, Vodacom was new in the country, MTN was new. There was no Cell C at the time. I don't want to give my age away, but there was no Cell C at the time. And we were the first class of that BSc Data Communications Technology. And so I did that for 3 years. So computer science, but majoring in BSc Data Communications. And then this was still down in KZN. I was very close to home, so I decided I wanted to do my honors and I wanted to leave home. So I was fortunate to get into the University of Johannesburg, where I did my honors in Informatics. And then after my honors in Informatics, I entered the job market. I started my career as a graduate at Standard Bank. And I was a graduate at Standard Bank, and I subsequently spent 2 years there. However, the one thing I always wanted to do, which I always aspired to do, was to get my MBA. So while I was at Standard Bank, I applied for my MBA, and I was told I needed 3 years working experience. So at that time, my focus became getting 3 years work experience.
While you were at Standard Bank?
While I was at Standard Bank.
What is Standard Bank?
Okay, so at Standard Bank, I started off as a graduate, and eventually I became a full-time business analyst.
Okay.
So what we did there was we worked between all the different divisions in the bank, and we did business analysis, where we were able to gather requirements for system changes, and we were able to help implement those changes and put them into the different systems at the bank. So I mean, this was a long time ago, but one of the projects that comes back to me now is when we were part of I worked on a project that helped Standard Bank go from simpler, better, faster, so inspired, motivated, and involved.
Oh, yeah.
So when they did that, they had to change all the front ends, they had to change all the websites, the intranet, with the new slogan and stuff, and I was involved with that. So Standard Bank gave me actually a glimpse of consulting, which allowed me, but I was consulting within the same organization, although different departments. So I felt like I wanted to take that to another level. And that's when I moved into a company called SAP, SAP. Some people call it SAP. So it's a German-based software company, and I was there for about a year and a half. And I worked with a variety of clients in different industries, implementing SAP software. And then at that time also, I applied for my MBA. I got in, and I quit my job. And I went straight to business school full-time, and I was there for about 1.5 to 2 years of my life. And then what happened was I was almost like overqualified for my age, but at the same time I was out of the market, so I struggled to get back into the work, and I was applying for jobs, but at the same time a lot of small businesses would approach me to help them, using my MBA skills. And I was doing that. And then slowly but surely, working on projects here and there, I landed my first JSE listed client on a project. And that was Liberty Properties, to be specific, but a subsidiary of the Liberty Holdings, Liberty Group.
Okay, doing what exactly?
So there I was a consultant as well. On that project, we were tasked with helping Liberty do two things. Number one was the Liberty Properties wanted to define an Africa strategy. So we were helping them to unpack certain African markets that they had earmarked. So there were 6 markets that they had earmarked, and we had to understand that markets and do research and put a report back to them. And then the second thing was Liberty is within the Liberty Holdings group. There is a company called Stanlib. And which is an asset manager. However, Liberty Properties had their own asset management department, and they wanted to relocate that asset management department into Stanlib, so that all the asset managers sit under the same company. So we were helping them to write the business plan for that and implement that over, and basically help with the transition over. So I was involved in that project. It gave me a whole lot of world into big corporates, but also being a consultant. Because you're working directly, you're not working via an employer. And then since then, I've done a lot of random things, all related to business. I've worked for startups, I've worked for big corporates, I've worked for.
Just slow down because we are skipping a lot of information here.
Okay.
For instance, what is the one thing that you can? Say 3 things that can come on the top of your head that you say, for this particular company in the centers, I've done this, for this, I've done this, for this. You don't have to name them, just to say these are the things, so that because that's what we're trying to get on here.
Okay, so I mean, if I think of maybe the one prominent thing that maybe I would mention, because I seem to be doing over and over, it's the area of regulatory compliance.
Okay,
what
is that?
Okay, so regulatory compliance is a typical, if you are a business in South Africa, you are working on South African soil. And for you to operate on South African soil, you have to comply with the laws of the land. Now, every company, depending on industry, has certain things that they need to comply with. So there's typically a regulatory or supervisory body that oversees different industries in South Africa. So as far as what I have done, mostly in the banks. So I've done work in about 5 of the big banks in South Africa, and I worked in the regulatory compliance in the area of Financial Intelligence Center Acts, which most people know as FICA.
Okay.
So typically when we talk about FICA, you're thinking, I want to go open a bank account, and I want to take, I need to take my ID and my proof of address.
Yes.
And that's what most people see when they see FICA.
Yeah.
But that one thing is one section.
Okay.
Of about 80 sections,
There's 80.
So behind the scenes, there's a whole lot that happens. There's a whole customer relationship framework that goes from what they call onboarding, but it's really, we call it establishing a business relationship with the customer, and then you need to know your customer, and then you need to monitor that relationship. You need to review, you need to put a risk rating on that customer, because that influences how you relate to them. You need to report on that customer. There's various reporting obligations that are required. And then at some point, you need to terminate that relationship should it be deemed too risky, So there's a whole operation that happens that we get involved with. Okay. So and then also at some point you have to engage with the regulator, to say, okay, these are what we're doing, etc. As a matter of fact, if my memory serves me right, today's the 2nd of April.
Yeah. And
the FIC Amendment Act that was passed into law, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if it's across the industry as far as the banks go, the FIC Amendment Act is enforceable from today. Because
the one that says we are not supposed to bring, which one?
No. It's the same legislation. They just amended it about 2 years ago. So I don't know if you recall, there was a time it was all over the news. There was a FIC Amendment Act, and then Zuma did not want to sign. The president did not want to sign the legislation.
Okay.
And they were pushing in Parliament, and then eventually the president signed the legislation.
Okay.
So that legislation, if I'm not mistaken, as far as the banks go, I don't know if they've changed it. From today, it now becomes law, because what typically happens is that when a new law wants to be signed into law, there's a process of drafting the legislation, and then it has to be adopted in the I think the Council of Provinces, which is like the provincial parliament, and then from there it goes into the National Assembly, and then everybody reviews it, they debate it, they might either send it back or eventually or they pass it on. Eventually Parliament adopts it, then it sits on the presidential table to sign into law. So the president signs it into law.
Okay.
However, depending on the type of legislation, if the legislation requires extensive system changes for the companies and stuff, they might say, okay, it's law, but we're not going to enforce it right now, which means we cannot fine you if you don't comply.
Okay.
So they might say to you, it's law, but you've got X number of
time
years, for you to comply. Or they might actually even say, okay, there are 10 sections 1 to 5, it's enforceable immediately. 6 to 10, you've got a year. Things so those, and that's where the regulators come in, and there's a whole negotiation that happens to like what's a reasonable time before things can become law, etc.
Okay, so a person like Ayo, what role do they play in that particular?
Sure. Okay, so for one of the banks I worked for, this was some years back. Well, actually, it ran over a few years. We started out at a time when the regulator had just. We started at a time before when the regulators were planning to do inspections on the banks. So what typically happens is the regulator sends a notice to the banks that we're coming to inspect. So that's they can have what they call a routine inspection or a non-routine inspection, and they tell you which areas they come in, and then they tell you what they need from you. So there's a whole data gathering process where you have to prepare, and then typically what happens is they ask you for a boardroom.
Okay.
Nobody's allowed to use that boardroom. They lock it up for 30 days. That's where they sit. They can call anyone in the organization to come and present to them, and then they do their own research, auditing. They have access to all information that they want, and so so I was part of helping the organization, the bank in question, to prepare for that.
Okay.
And then And then after that, what typically happens is the regulator goes away and they come back with a report.
Okay.
And that report will say what the gaps are, where we were compliant, where we were non-compliant, what the observations are, and most importantly, what they call remedial actions are.
Okay.
So these are the things you need to fix.
Okay.
You know, and I mean, they would already have determined that you're non-compliant. So,
okay.
So they can very well also come back and fine you,
okay.
or warn you, or even take your license and say you're no longer allowed to operate the trade shuts down.
Okay.
So my role started with preparing for the inspection, and then it basically went into helping to implement some of the remedial actions.
Okay.
Which is not necessarily IT. It could be training. It could be hiring a certain position that the legislature says you need to have someone with this job and that job, you know.
Okay.
It could be processes where you need to basically define people's jobs, functions for them. When you say you do A, then you do B, and then you define that whole process.
Okay.
It could also be technology, which could be, you know, you need to do this. It could be record keeping, because we're not storing records properly. You know, it could be anything, but basically it runs across multiple parts of the organization and multiple levels as well.
Okay.
You know, everything from, you know, because it's a bank, the guy at the branch, right up to the CEO level.
Okay.
You know, so and then as we were finalizing that, the regulator came back and said, look, we're actually looking to amend the legislation, and we are looking to change the system on our side. So we were involved in that as well. We had a say, because we had to comment on the draft legislation. It's called a bill in that stage. We had to comment. So we had our say, we gave our inputs. We did an organizational impact to say, should they sign this into law? How will it impact us as an organization?
Okay.
We also, because we do a lot of reporting to the legislation, which is like system to system, we had to, if they were changing the systems on their side, it means we had to change the systems on our side to ensure that it can still report to their new systems. So there was a lot of system work in that process also. So it was. I mean, the base thing was understanding the legislation and then figuring out how you can use, come up with solutions, because it's legal terms, and then you need to come up with operational interventions that you can implement to ensure that the gap between we call it non-compliance, you know, the non-compliance gap is catered for, cool. as much as possible. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, so now say a person who's watching this right now, because Career Corner is not about just what you call people who are in high school per se.
Sure.
There could be a guy in a dormitory in varsity who's watching this right now. He's like, okay, next day I need to start looking for work, or maybe like options. Basically, he's looking at an option. Okay, maybe I can do, because like honestly, if I thought me as Ratata, I'm thinking IT is about fixing a computer.
Sure.
It's about like, hey Ayo, here's my computer. It doesn't want to play my movies anymore and my music, please fix it. But now I'm learning with doing Career Corner with the people I'm meeting that the jobs that some of the people maybe study for, or some and such, they are so diverse. They are so big in a way that there's so many gaps, there's so many openings. How can you advise a person who's watching this? Okay, if you want to go into this kind of thing that I'm doing, these are the things you should look out for. Maybe tips that you can help them with if maybe you felt like you took too much time achieving certain goals, how they can go about it in getting into the job market. I'm not talking about the actual work, just getting into the job market, yes, and especially in choosing the careers that are right for them.
Yeah. So look. Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot that comes to mind, so I'm just gonna try and see what comes out of my mouth.
Okay, cool. Let's go.
So I think for me, one of the things I have learned, or a couple of things that I've learned, just reflecting on life, is that the first thing will be, obviously, it's always good to be curious in life. So what I mean by that is have a culture of wanting to learn things, you know. And yes, I mean, you know, get a degree. It's always good to have a degree or two. But that aside, you know, the books should not be shut once you get the graduation and you get your qualification. You know, I mean, these days we have online universities that offer free courses like Coursera.
Okay.
And so the way the world works is that I mean, I just talked to you about compliance, and I've got an IT or business degree, so I don't have a law degree.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show that, you know, ultimately there are no guarantees in life. However, if you create a culture of appreciating the world that we live in and learning about that world, you would always have something to offer the world.
Yes.
So having that, to be curious about life, have a culture of learning, keep improving yourself. It doesn't mean you have to, if you can't afford to get a degree every couple of years, you know, get a baseline degree, do short courses if you have to.
Yeah.
Read up, you know, study online courses, do those kinds of things. That's the first thing I would suggest. The second thing is to have a strong work ethic.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, every employer and every employee, underneath that is a human being.
Yeah.
You see, people hang out with people they like.
Yeah.
If you are the employee that shows up, if you are the employee who gives your all, if you are the employee who is always curious to learn and to add value, people will see that. You know, we live in a world where people will do what's actually standard and we applaud them for it, because around us everybody's trying to take shortcuts. You see, so I'm saying that have a strong work ethic, be willing to serve your fellow man, you see, and somehow life has a way of rewarding you with time. You know, it might very well be that after your first job is coming to an end, some guy that you helped 3 years ago, who's now a top guy in another company, remembers how you made them feel when you helped them, and that's the guy that's going to give you your next job.
Exactly.
So always go out of your way to add value to other people's lives. I have a philosophy that says that every person around me's life must be better off because I'm in it.
Yes.
And that's what I try to spread even when I'm working.
Okay. Not just with your job, because like I feel like what you just said is not just about your particular job, but with any field that you choose to go into. It could be a guy who is a welder, who welds these beautiful butler cards and doors. It could be a guy who works in the zoo. As long as we have that passion to actually make other people feel good about what you do, at the end of the day, it all works out. Like life has a way of just, it's funny, it turns around. Look at me, I have my own show now. After everything I've been through, I have career corner now.
That's correct.
Exactly, and it's happening before.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, my man, Ayo, thank you very much for your words today and your time today. Hopefully, whoever's watching this can pick up the advice, because we're going to do a lot of this. We're going to hit you guys with so many episodes and so many career choices and so many advice and so many motivation. It's going to be crazy in South Africa. My man, before we go, thank you for that. Shouting out Career Corner, can you just say, Ratata Career Corner, Ratata?
Ratata Career Corner, Ratata.
Dream big, think sharp. Ra, cut, we out. Short, bra. Thanks.